Hello everyone, my name is Alexander Morel. I'm the CRO of Scaleway, which is a European cloud provider. Today I'm gonna explain you 6 winning strategy for Agile SaaS editors. What does it mean? It means that we want to help SaaS editors to be successful in their activities, especially in current times. And my will in this talk is to explain you some tips that could help you organizing your business and taking the right decision in terms of architectures to develop your software and be more agile in such a situation. So who we are, Scaleway. At Scaleway, we are the European leader of public cloud ecosystem and hyperscaling data centers. We are proposing both a public cloud ecosystem and, by the way, we also are an availability zone for many providers and software providers who want to deploy big data centers in Europe. We're a pioneer of bare metal cloud, and we are also in the top players of infrastructure as a service and public platform as a service. As a cloud provider, we're proposing a cloud ecosystem with many bricks and that our software customers can bring together to build their complete architecture with us. What are the 6 strategies I want to share with you today for SaaS editors? We'll see that there are 6 of them. Switching to microservices, we will talk about multi-cloud. We will see what focusing on unique value proposal can bring to you. We will also see that being part of a software ecosystem can be very useful for you. We will also develop API to accelerate new sales channels. And then we'll also see you why you should give your customer first and then try to make them addict to your software, and how using a business model including free tier and freemium part could be really useful nowadays. So first, let's start with switching to microservice architecture. Why microservice architecture is not definitely something completely new. In fact, in the past, software providers used to split their software into parts. But today, what is new is the microservice architecture is not just splitting the software, splitting the full stack, including the infrastructure below, so that you can scale part of your software and not all the part of your software at the same time. It's also a useful tool to being able to sell just a part of your solution on the market and not your full software to your customers. It will help you because you will have to redesign your software architecture into microservices, and this lets you identify where is your core value. Because when you develop a software, you have a lot of bricks, a lot of functions, but when everything is completely connected into a single tenant, it doesn't allow you to see where you are really good at. When you create a software, you create many things. You have the user interface, you have the login, you have many features, but most of the time, your real core value is just some of the functions are really important for your customers, and this is the only thing that makes you different from the other software providers. If you're not able to locate them, to isolate them, in fact, you are spending a lot of money and time developing and maintaining a complete software where a lot of it is just something that everybody is doing the same. So you need to know where your core value is, and I will re-explain this later. Thinking your software as microservices is also really useful because it will accelerate your delivery. You will have to reinvent your versioning system. It can help you to simplify specific development. Why? Because instead of developing a complete version, for example, you have a new version of your software and it will require 3 months of development for your customer to see it. Now, if you are using microservices, the idea is you can deploy one service at a time And instead of having just one delivery, you can have 4 deliveries, as you can see on the screen. And maybe the feature A could be delivered in only 15 days, instead of saying, okay, you have to wait 1 month, 3 months to have your complete software. What is also really interesting, if in the past you have versioning, and when you are versioning, you need to update the complete software, and sometimes it's really complicated for your customers to have the latest version of your software. Now maybe you can separate and organize things, identifying what can be updated and what can wait to be updated, and not deploy all the microservice updates at the same time. So that's really interesting too. Also, for proposing new features, you can have a more frequent update of your software, instead of proposing just a monolithic version, saying, okay, it's version 2, 2.5, 2.6. You can imagine, okay, there's a new feature every 2 days. And it keeps you, helps you keeping a complete and regular discussion and connection with your customers, because they are not waiting months to be delivered. They have contact with your company every day. In such days like after the COVID-19 crisis, you know that maybe your customer won't be the same tomorrow. What is interesting when you design your application with microservices is that you can imagine more easily knowing where is your core value, also knowing that bricks can be configured differently. You can imagine that your software is answering the needs of an A type of customers, but maybe this part or this part plus this brick and this brick bring together can be the basis of another software that can address another market and another type of customers. And this helps you to be more agile by creating, for example, new business areas. You can have, for example, features around supply chain, and you use only the part of the features that are for the end part of the supply chain, I mean inside the shops themselves. For example, if you are a cashier management system, you can use this and say, okay, I won't do the whole supply chain, I use all those bricks, and I will combine this with other customer experience inside the shop. So maybe those new features will create a new software by itself, just by combining the bricks. So this is more flexible to reinvent your software. Second thing, after rethinking your software into microservice, is being ready for the multi-cloud world. Multi-cloud is something that is completely useful, and also more and more used by many providers and many of your customers. Why you should be able to deploy your software on multi-cloud? You need to imagine yourself as on the top of the stack, because if you're a software provider and you switched to the SaaS, software as a service mode, it means that you're not the only one in the world to do this. In fact, you have many software providers who are running their software on Amazon, AWS, on Azure, Microsoft Azure, on Google GCP, and all your software today is most of the time linked or connected to one single provider. But this is maybe just your own strategy, because for many of your customers, they are using multi-cloud. Why? Maybe you will have to be faced to this type of question. Well, for example, I like your software, but I want to run it on my X and Y cloud architecture. If, for example, you decided to develop all your software on AWS, and some of your customers say, okay, I want all my architecture to run on Azure. I want to be able to connect the existing developments with my software provider. So, and I want it to be more efficient and more connected, even to the software I am using externally, and not only the software I develop myself. So maybe your customer will say, are you ready to run on such providers? We have some customers that comes to us and say, okay, till now I was only running on GCP, but in Europe, my customers want for example, in France, so it's a second question, in my own country, they want my software to run in a local cloud provider. Are you ready for this? For example, if your cloud provider like GCP has no data centers in one country, but you need to run your software in that country because people want, for data sovereignty reason, data to be stored in their local area, are you ready to be able to propose your software on a cloud provider that exists in that specific country? This is a quick question you will have to answer. Last one, but not the least, maybe some customer will say, I want your software to run the public cloud, but I would like that part of it to be able to be running on-premise in their own data centers, and all this to be connected. If your only answer is no, you should be full online and it will be only by GCP, for example. Maybe it won't be, you won't fit the need of the market because your customer says, okay, no, I want part of it, this module to run inside my company because this is too critical and I don't want it to run outside. Are you ready to be flexible enough to answer this? Well, this is why you should consider being multi-cloud. So multi-cloud is not just an idea, it exists today, because as you can see, 35% of companies says they have more than 4 public cloud at a time. So for their own project, they are using platforms that are able to run on several cloud providers and just a single one. You may say, okay, but I am a SaaS provider, this is no concern of mine. But in fact, if you're facing a big customer that has needs and he wants your platform to run on a specific cloud provider, you will have to get ready to move to that cloud provider. So how do you change? How do you organize yourself to be able to run on any cloud provider? This is a good question. For example, is your software ready for such a split? Well, it should, because one of your customers may say, I want those modules to run on AWS because they need to be connected to another application that is running on AWS cloud services. But maybe they will say, okay, these modules, these microservices are deeply connected to my production line. For example, you have edge computing tools, or you are running a warehouse, or it's connected to industry. You will need to have those modules running close to your customer. So maybe part of your software has to run close to your customer. Another part could be by Microsoft Azure, for example, and here I propose also you can have part of your software running on Scaleway in Europe for specific reasons. For example, you want to have data sovereignty in France and say, okay, I want to address this market, so I will take a local cloud provider that has a good footprint in Europe, for example. Okay, this could be this type of splitting that you will have to implement. So what are the technical tools to be able to split your software and to cover all this? Part of the covering can come from historical vision of things. It means that, okay, your software is using such a database or such a runtime, and now I just have to reinstall it. Okay, you can imagine you run on MySQL, you want to run on MySQL by another cloud provider. Okay, but deployment can be quite long and automation can be quite long. Maybe you can also imagine that you are using standard hypervisors such as VMware or OpenStack, and you think that you will have just to move and deploy your VMs so that it can run on any cloud. This was a second approach a couple of years ago, but we have better things now. You can also imagine that you are developing on standard APIs with code launchers, such as Terraform, or you're saying, okay, my software is completely using, for example, for data, I'm using the S3 Open API, so that any cloud provider proposing an S3 API could fit with my software. So I can take my code and I put it to another cloud provider and it's still running. So whatever is the asking, I can be organized to run this. Okay, there is another approach which we think is much better and even much flexible, because if I'm using microservices platforms such as Kubernetes, for example, and my development is done on Kubernetes, this type of platform is specifically and great designed to deploy part of microservice on one provider, part of the microservices on another provider, and maybe part of the microservices on-premise directly by the customers. So this is why when you design your code with microservices, then you can use these microservices platforms to deploy part of your software, part of your architecture, or some specific definition of your architecture by one provider or another provider, and so comply to the needs of your customers today, who are becoming more and more multi-cloud. So the first strategy that I want you to have a look at is the idea of unique value proposal, because we talked about microservice architecture, which is splitting your software into single softwares working and discussing together. So when you've done this work and you're able to split your software, you will have the map of your software, and each brick has its own architecture and it can run standalone, discussing with others. It's not just a vision of modules inside the software, it's a complete stack, including the running environment and including the cloud environment. So if you've done this split, you can start thinking about making them work more separately. And when you look at the picture, you will see things. First, you can imagine in that part of your module is just in terms of software reinventing the wheel, because you recreated identification, file management, communication tools between your users, AIM for managing the rights, the display, the dashboards, portal, whatever you want. There is a lot of functions that is not just specific to you, but every SaaS provider in the world deployed the same. So maybe you are spending a lot of time and money to maintain, develop something that everybody has also developed. Though in that point, that's not a good, that's not the highest point of your value. Another part is that you will have duplicated business value and data. For example, you will write basic information, a list of customers, list of orders. I will call it, it's quite like all your ERP basic functions, where you just read, write data, display, save. All this type of software has no real value in the market. You have to do it because you have human interface, but this is not where your software will become different from the others. So in the end, when you are in honesty, when you look at yourself in the mirror and look at what's the real value of your software, you have a few unique value. Sometimes it's expert calculations, because you are, for example, proposing things like forecasting. Sometimes it's 3D calculations, sometimes it's AI, sometimes it's edge, sometimes it's automation. The idea is you can also imagine that a big part of this value comes from the data itself, because the data of your customers is probably what you have what has the biggest value for yourself. This type of automation, edge calculation, AI, smart things that you do inside your software is the only thing that has a real value. And if you can isolate it, you will be able to reinforce it. And if you can reinforce it, you will be able to propose it as your core business, and maybe you can be able to send it or sell it standalone. So what you will do after this, you can be part of a software ecosystem, or maybe in the future being yourself the ecosystem. Why? Because when you sell to your customers, you can decide that you sell your software directly to your customers. By the way, you can decide also to see what a major editor ecosystem can bring you. Maybe you would like to be part of this ecosystem to access to an unlimited number of customers. By yourself, with your own marketing, your own sales team, you can only address some customers. Maybe if you can be inside a big ecosystem, you will be able to do more and to be more efficient and do a better business. So For example, if you look at this one, at Exchange, which is one ecosystem driven by Salesforce, then I think you could imagine being part of such an ecosystem, saying my application by itself would have a better footprint on the market if I am connected to a big software, and instead of redeveloping everything, with the value I have, I can just bring some added value to this ecosystem. Another example, I had this example a couple of days ago for an HR software provider. You can say by yourself, well, I will create a software that is covering a lot of features on many topics around HR software. But if you look at just on the right side, for example, the HR ecosystem and the many bricks that you can bring to a company about improving workforce efficiency, you say, wow, I cannot compete with all those software, but if I would be a part of this ecosystem, maybe I can reduce the scope of my software, but proposing just the value to complete this ecosystem and being more integrated with others. So this is where knowing where your core value is inside your software, maybe it's just 30%, maybe 25% of your software is really smart. This part, if I can sell it standalone, can be connected to a complete ecosystem and accelerate it. For example, you have more and more software providers that are trying to connect to, for example, LinkedIn, if I'm taking one provider. If my software is proposing value for HR, for people hiring, I may want to be connected to LinkedIn and say, I don't propose my full software, I propose a couple of features that LinkedIn could propose to the end customers, but that their own footprint to the market is huge. And if I sell a couple of features to LinkedIn that is integrated to their ecosystem, well, maybe this will bring me a much bigger market possibility to address. So in the situation of COVID-19, and as you know, many companies said that they will also do a SaaS reduction of costs. So maybe selling through or selling with a bigger or existing player that already has many customers can be a better approach than trying to become just another provider in a situation where companies will try to reduce the number of providers. So if you say, okay, I want to sell my software direct, maybe this approach of being just one more software inside this company is not the right one. Maybe it is smarter to go to existing software that can take part of your value, part of your microservices inside their software, and so being an indirect software seller than trying absolutely to sell my full software to the customer who don't have money and time to add one new software, and maybe he will just try to reduce the number of software. So if you're not one of the 30 big names that you can see here on the right, and you know many of them, well, maybe you should think about which could be the one you would like to partner with. Which one could propose your unique software value to their massive customer? Do you know the microservices that you could take apart and propose to your final customer through those big apps? Maybe you have a smart calculation module, you have a smart forecasting module, and those modules could be proposed to big players that will take them inside, and maybe you will the business model will generate less revenues for each sale, but you have a huge number of customers. So in the end, your revenue will be huge too. So this is another approach, and it brings to the SaaS players the need to think about, could I imagine to sell each pieces separately to my final customers through an indirect channel this way. The fifth strategy that I would propose is to complete this approach, meaning that API could help you opening those new channels. Because when you look at your software, when you have your software and you propose it directly to your customers, okay, that's all the job you're doing every day, trying to find your customers directly. But with your APIs, for example, you get APIs with your microservices APIs to consume your product or part of your product. You have APIs that allow you to set up and deliver this API to some customers. And you may have APIs for billing APIs or to bill your customers. Well, if you partner with a bigger SaaS, what will happen? He will be able to bring you cash, and he will integrate you inside his bigger software, because it will take just the microservices he needs, and it will take your core value where you can focus on and to address a bigger market. And you become you are more specialized, but you are also able with this specialization to target directly more and more customers every day. You can also plug to a SaaS reseller portal where you will be able to propose your software. And once again, if the SaaS reseller is proposing your software online, it's another indirect channel. Well, he will also be able to bill directly and with automation, and you will be able to set up automatically and deliver your software to the end customer because you automatize your delivery. So automation and billing is great, and if you are able to put them apart with microservices for part of all of your software, you will be able to partner with SaaS reseller who are looking for software that can be deployed automatically with no sales guy, no manual deployment, but fully automatically to third party. And with the added value microservice that you identified in your value analysis, those microservices combined with billing API could be great to address another part of the market, which is being just a part of a bigger SaaS market. And you have more and more companies that are looking this way. For example, I know a company that is very good at making video processing. Instead of proposing this video processing or video smart analysis, they just decided to review their business and focus on microservices, and now they propose the microservices directly into Adobe software. So it means that they're not building anymore the IHM, they're not building the full software, they're not building logging, they're just proposing the great algorithm they have, but it's now sold through another big SaaS provider because they are now focusing on the core value of images analysis. So last but not least, many of you already switched to the SaaS mode, software as a service. So you're proposing online, you are multi-tenant through a single interface. So all these allows you to sell everywhere in the world and address a huge market. So that's really important nowadays to accelerate your business. By the way, when you look at how many of software editors switched to a subscription model, you see that 80% of them are now using subscription. The license mode is just less than 10% now. So the time has changed. Many people switched to subscription. Not all of you are SaaS, but most of you are proposing subscription to your software. That's good news, meaning that you know that the idea is not selling once, but selling many times and for a long time. So having your customers more connected to you and life cycle of customers is longer. That's the good news. The bad news is today when you look at how long, what are the periods of subscription proposed by the SaaS provider globally, you see that most of them are proposing 1 year, 3 year, or more than 3 year models of subscription, which looks like a lot like the former model with licenses. What should be seen on this graphic is that less than 1 year is just a couple of you, but less than 1 year is all the subscription that allows you to discover your product. And it means that when you have this, you don't have a pyramid of a company that is gonna make thousands and thousands of users. So if you want to benefit from the SaaS mode, you will have to consider the second step, just not thinking about the first step, which is proposing SaaS. The second step is how you will be able to propose freemium, free tier, I mean a part of your software that is free up to a certain level of usage, so that at a point you are able to make a bigger and bigger attraction. It's not just about thousands of users, it's about getting 100,000 of new users each month, so that among them you will get more and more able to pay. That doesn't mean that the people who will pay are always the same, are the people who are testing your platform. Because we say, okay, I've got now thousands of users, but only hundreds of them are getting paid. But in the end, when you look at this, you can have some customers that are just there to use the free product part of things with the free modules that you will have decided among all your microservices. But they will use it, and if they like it, maybe there will be just your community. This community makes your awareness raise all around the world in every country. And among this community, maybe they won't consume more, but they will do a lot of noise, because in a SaaS mode that is successful, I mean worldwide, you will need to have people making your awareness, and you will have customers that will make your money. And these two are not maybe the same ones. So at a time, you will have to be able to consider that maybe they won't be the same. The consumer that use the freemium is not always the consumer that will pay for your product. So maybe with microservices, you will have to build two offers, one to make the money and one to build your brand. And in both stories, you will have to find which core value, unique value will be given to your community to be known, and which core value will be given to your product users to buy your products and decide to use it every day. So this as an example, by Scaleway, we've decided 6 months ago to change. We had a product launch which was good, but with not the growth that we're expecting worldwide. So we've decided to introduce a free tier inside our own product. What happened at the first months is after we introduced the free tier, we could be afraid because we saw the revenue decrease, because of course part of your revenues are now becoming free because you created a free tier for part of the offer. But by the way, the number of users increased a lot during those months. So number of users increased and revenue decreased. But after 6 months, what happens? Things are changing because part of the free tier created an effect on the part of people that are paid. And with the scaling FL, this funnel effect, we have now a big part of freemium becoming customers. It takes time, but once you do it, your machine is running now, and you're getting now thousands of users, but 100,000 of users coming to your application. And even if your transformation rate is not 10%, but only 3%, I prefer personally having 3% of 100,000 customers than getting 10% of 1,000 customers. And at the end, this is bankable. So sometimes you need to be brave to change your model and not only switch to SaaS, but going further and give them first. Give your customers something free, give your value to your customers free. That creates your community to have a massive effect and become an hyperscaler. This is something that takes time, but is really worth it at the end. So to resume, we have 6 strategies. One is splitting into microservices, because that's the key of many possibilities in your business, because you can decide what you will do with one piece or with another one. Second, trying to become multi-cloud, because with the right approach, for example, using Kubernetes, You are able to split your application microservices between several providers, being able to be on-prem, to be on cloud, and all these gives you a lot of flexibility to answer any kind of requirement from your customers. Third, you will need to know which of those microservices have a high value so that you can focus on them, put your energy on it, and maybe say those modules could be sold through new channels, allowing them for the first one. You will be able, with this approach, to be part of bigger ecosystem. I propose my core value inside bigger software who've got many more customers and able to accelerate my business. Fifth one, with an API approach of those modules plus API billing, API delivery, you are able to be connected to indirect world. For example, bigger software providers, but also SaaS resellers. And the more you are automated to deliver things, the bigger partnerships you will build with those companies. And sixth, and in the end, don't forget that whether you're going to go direct or indirect, if you're able to create a tiering of a free tier or freemium version of your software, your microservices architecture will let you know which module you can give and which one you reserve for a paid version. But in both cases, you will have to find the right value. But if you are allowing to your key community to discover the real value of your software inside a freemium version model, you will be able to scale up and become really successful internationally. Well, thank you for all your time. And if you have any question about those strategies, I will be glad to answer you. Have a great day.